Hello. To begin with, my hello. To begin with, my topic of oppression is the racial wealth gap. The picture I have displayed on the screen is from NPR and is one of my favorite pictures that I've used throughout my task 1 and task 2 when looking at the racial wealth gap. It is easy to describe to somebody looking at that how a white person, such as the guy on the left here, has an advantage over somebody who is black on the right, as the guy on the left has many steps and makes it easy for him to get to the top, while the one on the right has just one step, making it very difficult to make it to the top. The racial wealth gap is defined as the difference in assets owned by the different racial groups resulting from economic factors that affect the overall economic well-being of these racial groups. And my main look at a thesis right now is that by spreading information about the racial wealth gap, awareness can potentially lead to more equality amongst the various races. I know that is not very problem solving, but it is what I think is the reality of the situation, and that it may not ever be able to be fixed. But if awareness is raised, there's a chance that that gap can maybe slim down a little bit, which is better than nothing. Looking into my sources, the first one I want to talk about is systematic inequality. This source is written on the Center for American Progress, and it's a very good source. And it's written by Angela Hanks, Danielle Salmon, and Christian E. Weller. And these people, all here, are all very talented and highly educated journalists for the news outlet Cap 20. The article lists off 7 facts of the racial groups, as it says here. And it goes through many different reasons for what is happening within the racial groups and why there is such a gap occurring. My main focus out of the article was on the information was how African American people are at a disadvantage, as they spoke about other groups such as Hispanics. There are a lot of numbers and statistics presented throughout the article that make it easier for me to find good takeaways from my research, and there's even a big section that compares the wealth gap throughout the decades of the years in the median wealth between white and black people, as it is in this graph here. There's one of them. And here's the median wealth and the mean wealth, and also looking at the shares. And that chart also has the percentage of people with negative wealth between white and black people. And this source is very informed, it's backed up on their thesis of the inequalities between white and black people in the wealth gap and the way they statistically prove their claims. And it's not only a great article, but it's also visually pleasing to viewers, at least for me, making it easier to pick up information that I can apply to my research. The main takeaway that I found was when looking to improve the lives of the lives of people through bold actions, there are many ways African American people have been at a structural disadvantage, which leads to many wealth issues. One of the main things that they have dealt with is less access to tax advantage forms for savings due to the discriminations during employment. Also, mortgage market discrimination makes Black people less likely to own a home, which gives them a weakened chance to gain the tax benefits of home ownership. Many of these discriminations lessen the opportunity for African American people to hold stable jobs with good pay, and most importantly, retirement benefits. Not a lot of people know how big retirement benefits are until you get to that point of life. But if you're unaware, they're huge, and they can also lead to the generational well-being of the people in your future rather than just yourself. Looking into my next source, Why the Racial Gap Persists More than 150 Years After Emancipation, written by the Washington Post. This article is written by Calvin Schermerhorn, and he's a professor who teaches and researches American and transatlantic history from the colonial era to the present at Arizona State University. He's very educated and he has deep roots in history and has spent many hours educating himself on others on history as he is a professor. He has a deep level of education with a PhD from the University of Virginia, an MTS from Harvard Divinity School, and a BA from St. Mary College of Maryland. And the main thing that I took away from this source is that the racial wealth gap has persisted to be a major issue for over 150 years. After many years of slavery, people were set free, but only to be put in a system that would make it nearly impossible to become equal to the white man. That made it set up to be where the next 150 years as a game of what I call catch up for many African American people. And the quote that I took out of this, which is right here in this first little page, is that the typical black family has just 1/10 the wealth of the typical white one. In 1863, black Americans owned 1/2 of 1% of the national wealth. Today, it's just over 1.5% for roughly the same percentage of the overall population. Taking that into consideration, that there are over 330 million people that currently live in the United States in this day and age, the number of African American wealth is very low. This large level of wealth gap arises not from an individual issue, as many people believe, but rather from a deep structural issue. If you can remember from the first couple weeks of this class, the video on the structural issues with America, the person who narrated that video went into great depth on how the structural issues lead to many wealth problems for African American people. And not a lot of people are easy to look past the easy solution to a problem, especially in a time where everything is so divided. And the way I look at it is that in a small town like ours, I see that many people believe African American people set themselves up to be at a disadvantage, but they're not informed on the deep systematic issues that have led to these issues that this article talks about. And they keep their one-sided mind and they don't realize that they're at a disadvantage while they're living life at their own advantage life. One thing that my tennis coach would always talk about is that when a good way to look at white people versus black people in a wealth situation is that imagine you're starting a race, but you were 10 laps behind and it was a 1 lap race, or it was an 11 lap race. And that's just the way that I've always kind of looked at the difference between white and black people and just the advantage that I as a white person am set at compared to a black person. Looking into my next source, this is a article called "The Racial Wealth Inequality Stays High in a Strong Economy," and this is written by Forbes. This article is written by Christian Weller, and he is a senior reporter at American Progress and is professor of public policy at the McCormick Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. He is an extremely respected academic who has more than 150 different academic and popular publications. His area of expertise is in retirement income security, macroeconomics, money and banking, and international finance. And in this article, it is found that even in a strong economy, the wealth gap still persists. This article shows a lot of statistics to help prove their thesis of the racial wealth gap persisting. It is very important to show these statistics to make it clear that there's an easy issue over the years. And the main quote that I took from this is in paragraph 4, and it says that the median wealth of African Americans amounted to 44,900, or 15.8% of median wealth of white households in 2022. There are few signs of the wealth gap ever shrinking, and the average wealth for whites and blacks had gone up during the pandemic, leaving the gap fairly consistent, even with a boom to African American wealth. One positive thing that I look at that can be taken out of the research is that the wealth gap did not grow as it did many times in the past. The main thing that this source helped me show is that if people are at least becoming informed on the issues that are in front of them, there should be a positive outlook on the future of the racial wealth gap. And the sharing of information is just one small step in the fixture of a faster that this issue presents, and one step in the right direction of a misfortune that seems unfixable in the problem of equality. And the main thing I took is just the different visuals that they give here in the sources, or the graphs that you can look at and understand numbers easily. And then looking into my last source, this source is more of just an informative piece that I took in this article. It's called "What is Lending Discrimination?" and it's made by Lending Tree. And this article is written by Lindsay Frankel, and she specializes in real estate and personal loans, budgeting, savings, and different sources of economics, such as mortgages and insurance. And the main thing that I looked in this article is that it talked about lending discrimination. And it's described as when a lender makes a decision during the mortgage application process based on a person's race, color, sex, religion, familial status, nationality, age, receipt of public assistance, or disability. And this was something that I was looking into to try and tie into my main argument on how there's a deeper systematic problem that a lot of people do not see that contributes heavily to the racial wealth gap. The article is not very long, but I figured it would be good to add some outside pieces of information that not a lot of people would consider when talking about the racial wealth gap. This article is set up in a paragraph form and has headings that lead into the short sections of information. It also talks about the different red flags that can pop up when somebody maybe is running into some lending discrimination. Also, they give a couple looks into the future if there's ever some reason that uh, that there's a problem, such as a red flag. These include different links to asking for assistance, which is here, all the way to just comparing multiple lenders, as it says here. The writer is very educated on this topic and has put together a well-written article that gives great information for me to add to my main focus. It's very important for different levels of research, as sometimes these little pieces of information can help bring so much to the table. And this adds a new level of education focus to my research. And that is the end of what all my sources that I put down for my annotated bibliography for now. And I feel like I can use each one of these sources for just to add some information in a deeper root, especially with the other. This one is more of just an extra piece of information, as I said, to add a level of education focus to my research. But the other ones I can use more for statistics and different things to help show that there is a big gap and how big of a problem it is and how it's really not stopping. And people need to become aware of the situation to be able to try and maybe fix it. And looking into my goals that I made with my task meta 2, I know that I wanted to complete my assignments on time, which I have been. And I also wanted to go a little bit more in depth with my sources, as I feel I did with my annotated bibliography. And I also wanted to look and try and not get caught up on some of the sources for as long as I did and spend as much time in the brainstorming process and just kind of getting at the project right in front of me. And that is how I should be able to complete this project, and it should be a good project.